Hey friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com, and today's video is a side-by-side comparison between the two tarot decks put out by Ian Cumpstey of Scatty Press. The first is Rare Triumphs, which I reviewed months ago, maybe last year, a couple of years ago. I don't know when I did it, but it was a while back. And a comparison with the Great Parade, which is a more recent deck from 21-22. Some of you may already have this one, but some of you may not have both. So I thought it might be a nice idea to show both. The boxes, which would indicate the size of the decks, are a little different. So the Rare Triumph deck, I think, is a little more petite than the Great Parade. The texture of this box for the Great Parade is really cool. I love the way it feels. But both boxes are just fine. The Rare Triumph deck and the Great Parade deck both come with a little thank you card, which is also a very nice touch. I always appreciate when someone knows my name that, you know, I give my patronage to, so that's really awesome. And then a little something extra, that you know, an ID card saying, you know, a little card identifying it as a poem, which makes it clear that it's from Scatty Press. And the Great Parade comes with the order of both the Bologna and the Marseille order of cards. And again, an identifying card that lets us know that it's by Ian Cumpstey. And the backs of the cards are different. Also, the Rare Triumph came with a sheet which identifies the 22 Triumph cards. In case you're a novice, or even if you're not, if you just need a reminder or some keywords or something. So with the Rare Triumph deck, we had 3 additional cards, which I'll show now. These are the 3 I chose not to use, but sometimes I change my mind, and sometimes I use these 3 instead of the other 3. The first is the Fool, which identifies him as a music maker, impoverished. You know, he's in a setting that's kind of in disrepair. The second is the Worker, rather than the traditional magician that we're accustomed to seeing. He's an artisan. And then the third is called Player, which is the angel card, which is either the penultimate deck or the final card of the Bolognese deck. Now, the card stock of each deck is distinctly different, and it's hard for me to tell people which is the nicer deck. I can only say which card stock I like better, and I like the card stock of the Rare Triumphs better because I like my favorite finish is a linen finish, and you can see that this is a linen finish, and you can see how flexible this is. You know, very flexible, a joy to shuffle. This is more in keeping with like just regular paper card stock, or, you know, I'm sure it's high quality paper, you know. It's just a personal preference that I prefer linen finish on my tarot decks. I just like the way they feel. So if we were comparing this Fool to this Fool, they would have in common that they're noisemakers or music makers. So they would have that in common. Notice that neither of these has a label, has a name on it. No name, no number. And here we have the Wanderer with a name, and he's more in keeping with who we're accustomed to seeing as a traditional fool who's walking. Although this fool is not disheveled, he's not missing clothes, there's no dog. Now here we have the traditional magician, and you'll notice if you saw my review or my showcasing of this deck yesterday by itself, you'll notice that there are no names or numbers on any of these cards at all. Whereas on the Rare Triumph cards, we do have names. So for the magician that I didn't choose, we see an artisan in the Rare Triumphs. And in the Tarot Parade, we have one that's more in keeping with the Marseille tradition of ball and cup, and we do see it in the Italian decks also. But usually the magician, is in the Italian decks is more like an artisan, to be honest, at a table, right? And the one I'm using currently is, I like it because I like the implication that he's a trickster, you know, and I like the idea of the first card as being someone who's a little more mercurial than he seems. I kind of like that association better, which is why I use it. I'm not into the whole alchemy thing, you know, although I understand it, but I'm not that's not what I've glommed onto. And I think this one, you know, has a greater sense of, you know, the trickster with his game and trying to trick children in this case. Like a street performer for kids. This one is not a street performer for children, and neither is this one. So neither of these two really have that street performer meaning to them in the Rare Triumphs, like the Great Parade magician does. So we've taken the female pope out of the context of a religious kind of thing, and she's just named teacher, like a secular name. And here we do have more of a religious reference with the stigmata and the three-tiered papal crown and the staff in the holy book, presumably. We're definitely a knowledgeable and well-read person. And if you go to watch my playlist on the Triumph cards or the Trump cards from 0 to 10, I never got around to finishing the rest of them. I know I should. But if you go to those and you watch that playlist, you'll see a bit of where the female pope comes from. Possibly. Okay, so now we have the Empress, who her identity is more non-gender, or actually looks more male to me. Identified as a merchant, a worldly individual, as the Empress is. But I do like, you know, having the female presence in a position of authority. And then we have the Emperor, who is a nobleman in the Rare Triumphs. Again, two cultured individuals, worldly, presumably. Again, two heads, leader heads, one of counsel and spiritual matters, and the other, it seems, more secular. The Lovers or Love card can be readily identified in both. as I think can the Chariot. But you see that Rare Triumphs gave them different titles than tradition. And while I like the imagery, you know, I appreciate that there's no names. I just, on the Great Parade, I don't really like names on cards, words on cards. I don't mind the numbers because I'm interested in numbers, you know, but I just don't prefer to have names on cards. And here we have Justice. In one, she's blindfolded. In the other, she's not looking at us directly. And in both cases, her scale looks a bit skewed, although less skewed in the Rare Triumphs deck. The Hermit is, or Old Man Time, is similar in both, with the hourglass and the stave. His colors are the same, his white hair and beard. We do have the cave here. And Fortune being Fortuna. Again, I really love this image in this card over the traditional Wheel of Fortune. You know, the Wheel of Fortune card traditionally is imagery, just like for me, the World card. I just don't like the image. You know, I appreciate when there's a better way or a more artistic way of expressing that, you know, those two cards. But that's just me. And we have Fortitude, again, with the similar motif of a woman with a pillar. Now, the Hanged Men in these cards are quite different. For this one, we have the image of a gentleman riding his mule or donkey backwards. He's pointing at something. And the title of the card is Downfall, which is what presumably, traditionally and historically, the hanged one was. This is his downfall, right? He's being punished for something he's done. And the reason he's not dead and he's wide awake is because it was a type of wanted poster of the 14 and 1500s and perhaps earlier. And, you know, part of the punishment was your humiliation. And so you had to be identified, and you couldn't be identified if you looked like a corpse. You know, so it was an image of the person as he looked, so that the town would know that this person should be humiliated and disgraced. Similar death cards. And Temperance. Okay, so somehow, oh no, okay, this is the Devil cards, Chaos, in the Rare Triumph card deck. And in the Great Parade, we have a more traditional looking devil. Here we have more of a Vieilleville vibe, with a tree being struck, with a thunder, it's called Thunderbolt. Oh no, it was, yeah, okay. I don't want to misspeak. Sometimes I misspeak. And here we just have a tower without anyone falling from it. But we do see flames coming from the top of the tower and the crown falling. And in both cases, we see some activity in the form of orbs. If you're not careful and paying attention, you know, one might easily mistake this for the Lover card because we have a couple and then we have that third individual. But pay attention that there's a star in the image, then you'll realize that it is the Star card. And again, astronomers with their calipers, I think they're called, or the compass, or I'm not sure exactly what that's called, for the moon. And the sun, a woman in the pursuit of an activity involving thread. Sometimes it's seen in the moon card. And at some point in history, it could have been one way or the other, and the people who copied and followed it made the mistake and switched it up. I'm not sure which is which. Okay, now I'm going to do this first, because this is the order most of you probably are accustomed to seeing if you're TDM folk. So we have the Judgment card. But, you know, in the Italian tradition, it's called the Angel. And in Rare Triumphs, it's called Fame. And I love, 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 love either of these renditions of the World card because, as I've mentioned many times, I just don't like the traditional World card. They're very similar with the addition of a peacock in Rare Triumphs, and I think I prefer this image. Now, some of you who saw my video yesterday, you'll remember that I have what I thought were 3 damaged cards, but it's really 4. But I'm not gonna, I already asked Ian if he wouldn't mind replacing the 3. And, but there's a 4th card here. Because be careful when you get this or any deck, because these were the first 4 cards out of the gate, and they were stuck together. And when I thought I was doing it gently enough, I don't know how else to get them out of the pack. They were all damaged, and I guess there was like one of the intro card to this must have stuck to it. Let's see. Yeah, no, this one's not messed up, but this one is, so I'm not sure. So Ace, 2, 3, and 4 were damaged. But I only asked for 3 because I didn't notice the 4th until after he already verified. Ian already verified that he was sending me replacements, so I'm not going to, you know, I'm not going to bug him about it. And I just want I don't want to belabor the fact that the cards were damaged, but I do want to express that Ian is good people, you know, and he's making good on my request to replace those 3 cards, and I appreciate it very much. And I think, you know, it says a lot about him as a card maker, you know. And also, you know, as a warning to remind you guys that when you do get a deck, you know, doesn't typically happen with a finish like this, you know, but when you have cards that could stick together like this kind of deck does, just be really, 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 really careful. And as careful as I am, it didn't matter. But anyway, here we have the aces. Now you'll notice in the Rare Triumphs that Ian adopted rather, a pip designation, you know, with the pip card. So rather than swords, even though there's a reference to an arrow, you know, a pointed end, it really is the ace of the ace of spades. Or I think that's a reference to the pike, right? And so in the Great Parade, we really have more of a traditional swords thing going on. So the Great Parade is far more traditional in that regard, whereas the Rare Triumphs deck, you know, appropriates modern playing card symbols and suits, you know. But I mean, I think it's really obvious that these arrowhead type things come closest to the pointed end of a sword. But the designs of the swords and the batons in this Great Parade are beautiful, you know, very decorative, nice color. So when I go on vacation, initially I was thinking I would take this one, but sometimes, you know, weather's humid and I don't want to run the risk of these sticking again, depending on where I end up. So I may just take, I may actually really end up taking the Rare Triumphs because I don't see sticking being a problem with, you know, this cardstock. I do like when I go away, you know, I do like to take a variety of cards and decks. I've never been like a one card reader except for the periods of time in my early days of the 70s when I could only get one deck, you know. But as soon as I started having a variety of TDM style or Besançon style it was in those days, I really preferred, you know, having a couple different, because I am a person who does prefer a little variety. And some people can read with the same deck for 15 years, which is fine, but that's not for me, you know. I like to expand. I like to grow, and I've learned. I mean, I've read a lot of books. You know, I've shared, you know, some of my favorite books, but the best way that I've learned about tarot was simply by looking at tarot decks. You know, that's where I've learned most of what I've learned, and how I've taught myself to read tarot too. And you read the deck as well. You know, the thoughts that come into your mind might be different with this card than this card, right? And both interpretations would be correct. But the images might spark a different thought process. You know, I really ought to use the Rare Triumphs more than I do. And I'm definitely going to bring it on vacation. So when I'm on vacation, you'll see me using it. You might not know I'm on vacation, but unless you'll recognize that the tabletop is different. But you know, the hearts, we definitely get, you know, the same kind of vibe as we might with the cups, being emotional. If you identify the suit of cups as an emotional suit, some people may not, but I do. And so, you know, the switch of modern day pips works for me in matching them up to the suits that I'm accustomed to for those values. And you definitely get a different feel from the arrangement of 9 hearts than you do in the arrangement of 9 cups. And neither of these decks was put in the order that I'm showing. I just came up with this order to, I needed to remember, you know, I needed to have an order to be consistent with showing decks. And so I just show this order of, you know, swords, cups, batons, and then coin. But it's not for any particular reason other than that's just what I came up with. So here we have kind of like a fool vibe with a little critter, you know, jumping at the leg of the Jack of Hearts, who has an axe, not a satchel. And here we have the Knave of Cups vibe that we see in some decks where it's a fella, you know, like in the Marseille decks, right? It's a youth, you know, who has a wreath in his hair and holding the hat. Some people think it's a cover, but it looks an awful lot like a hat. Well, I think it's a hat, you know. And a lot of times the cup itself is covered with cloth from the garment. So if this is a cover, why go through the process of covering it with a garment if you have the cover right here? But we may never know. So as in the Chariot card and the Death card and this card, we see the black earth. We get a little bit of a Suicide King vibe with the King of Hearts. So both of these decks are quite different from the other, right? They have their own flavor. Certainly the Great Parade is far more traditional, and if you're accustomed to the Bolognese or even the Marseille style, there are some varieties, but you can readily, if you've seen enough traditional historic tarot decks, you can definitely pick out what these cards are with or without numbers or names. And Rare Triumphs more or less spells it out for you. I'm just going to flip them from here at this point. And if you saw my video from yesterday, you'll recall that the tens of both the swords and the batons have a vertical and horizontal laying of the 10, the last two weapons, items. I guess a baton is not necessarily a weapon, except that sometimes it does appear as a cudgel. We have another black earth, I forgot, in the Knight of Batons. There may have been others that I just forgot to comment on. Our queens, kings, and the final suit. Now I do like this nod to the hare and the hound, you know, the hunt, you know, this list, you know, who participates in those kinds of activities. Well, people who have a life of leisure and have the opportunity to just spend time doing stuff like this, you know, certainly not the average person who's, you know, doing this. Let's see, you know, certainly not the average laborer. Oh, I can't find the card. It toppled or whatever. I was looking for the him, right? You know, so this, it is another reason why, in my mind, I've kind of associated, the aside from the fact that this represents generally money, the things you can do with money, right? The finer things in life that, you may not necessarily be able to do if you don't have any. You're too busy working. And so the diamonds of the Rare Triumphs is really nicely done. I think it's very pretty. And the coins, or the denarii of the Great Parade, is a little more in keeping to what we're accustomed to seeing. And you see that, visually, the arrangement in both decks of their pip cards are distinct. I mean, sometimes they're similar. As soon as I say that, there's a 5 and they're similar. But, they, even with the similar layout of the arrangement of the 5, there's things that are different about each that will spark a different thought. And so you may not interpret the 5 of diamonds, from this deck as you would the 5 of coins from this deck, even though generally they may make you think of a similar thing, but the way they are arranged with the other cards, and the way they bounce off the card next to it or above it or below it, it could definitely create a pattern that's different from a pattern you might get with the other arrangements on the other deck. So yeah, I love the diamonds. I think I said that the last time when I did this, when I showcased this deck. I especially like the diamonds. So, the other day when I did my video, I said, like, without looking back or without looking at this Rare Triumphs deck, I said that I thought I liked the Great Parade. And today, I like them both for different reasons. I'm partial to the Rare Triumphs, as I mentioned, for the wonderful cardstock, being linen. I'm a sucker for linen, it's just nice. And I also like the pips, but I really like the Great Parade because nothing is numbered and nothing is labeled, and that's how I prefer my cards. In fact, I've started creating a tarot deck myself a number of times, and every time I do it, I get frustrated because I do it by hand. I don't do it with a computer, and I always end up making a mistake, and I just get flustered and stop. And I don't remember why I mentioned all of that. Oh, because when I do my deck, I never name them. I never name the cards because I just think they should speak for themselves. And if you don't know what the card is, then, you're not communicating what it means. Oh, I screwed up here. I probably reversed these. Oh, okay. Page, did I go too fast? I made a mistake here at some point, so I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, I did right here. My bad. And again, we saw the female in this deck for the cup and the coin, whereas, Rare Triumphs, it's more, but all of them are male pages. As were the number 2 and 3 cards. They were males, they weren't women. So I do appreciate a more traditional deck because there's more diversity for genders in that. Oh, and here we go. So I guess all the knights must have a dark ground, a dark earth. And, some decks have the Uh-oh, I'm screwing up all over the place. So I don't know. I must have shown the... I'm sorry. Hopefully you caught it and you know what I did. Here's the queen. I don't know quite what I did, but I'm hoping you forgive me. And the final card is the king of diamonds or coin. So there we have it, the two decks, both by Ian Cumpstey, Rare Triumphs and the Great Parade. If you have one or the other, maybe this video will help you decide on getting the other. And I wouldn't hesitate to order from Scatty Press or Ian Cumpstey. That's his company. Because he's good people, and I would never hesitate to buy a deck from him. So until next time, friends, peace and stay well.